Diet and food is very important, and digestion and absorption goes with that. There's a saying in the West, you are what you eat, and that's true because the food, as it digests and transforms, gives rise to the body. It maintains the body, the physical body. But the subtle essence of the food gives rise to the mind. So there's actually two phases to digestion, two parts to digestion. There's gross digestion and there's subtle digestion. The gross digestion we're all familiar with. You eat the food, it goes to the stomach, to the intestines, it turns to a liquid form. That liquid form passes out of the intestines into the bloodstream. And then that which is not absorbed is excreted in the form of feces. And that's called gross digestion. And that's where most of the attention is placed because it's obvious what's happening. And there's important aspects to gross digestion that we can discuss. But then there's the subtle digestion that we're going to talk about. And the subtle digestion takes 35 days. So what you ate 35 days ago is now nurturing your nerves and nervous system, your brain and your mind. 35 days ago, the Pringles that you ate last month are now having an effect. A little bit of vata in the mind, a little bit of pitta in the mind, because of the Pringles last month. Because I know myself. Food should be enjoyable. That food should be prepared nicely and have a wholesome flavor, and should include all of the 6 tastes. All the tastes should be included, and we'll talk about that. The digestion starts at the grocery store. So the attitude that you have when you're shopping for your food will have an effect on your food. And of course, if you grow your own food, even better. But most of us in the city don't have that opportunity. But if you do, that's the best food. But if you go into the grocery store in a rushed or attitude of impatience, it's going to have an effect on the food that you're bringing home. And they say in the scriptures, if the money that you used to purchase the food was obtained in unscrupulous means, it's going to have an effect on the food. If you obtained the money in an unethical means, and now you've bought that food with that money, some of that karma is in that food, and that energy then over the 30-day subtle digestion is going to have an effect. So how you buy your food, how you acquire your food, and then how you prepare your food, all has an effect on your digestion and on the absorption and on your mind and on your body and on your health. So then how you prepare it. It should be prepared in a kitchen that's clean, that is calm, that there's not arguing or fighting. Because if people are arguing over the food while they're preparing it, it's going to have some of that prana will be in the food, and you'll taste it. It'll have a sour taste or a rancid taste. So sometimes you go to a restaurant and you had a good meal, and you go back to the same restaurant and you order the same dish, and it doesn't taste right. Because maybe there was something going on in the kitchen when they were preparing. So the taste is very important. It tells everything. If it doesn't taste right, don't eat it. because it's telling you something. The taste. Taste is very important. So we have a good preparation of food, we acquire the food in a good way, we prepare it nicely, and now we sit down to eat it. And we should say a prayer before we eat, of gratitude. And that food should be chewed well. I believe Gurudev used to say chew 100 times. Was it 100 times? Yeah. So there's a saying to drink the solids. Is that how it goes? You chew till it's liquid. I don't remember the saying now, but chew a lot. Okay. Chew a lot, chew well till it's really, really liquefied. That's important. If you don't chew it well, it won't digest well. And you should eat in a mindful way, mindful to the food, mindful to the taste, getting a sense of each of the tastes, and not in a hurry, and not arguing or not discussing business, not reading, not on the computer, not watching TV. You should be focused with the food, its relationship with the prana. And then thinking of it, you're feeding the divine. You're feeding the divine inside, and that's in the prayers that we sing in the opening prayer sometimes. Then, not to eat too much, not to eat too little. You don't want to be overfull. You shouldn't eat until the stomach is completely full. That makes it hard to digest. And poor digestion causes a lot of health problems. Food that we can't digest then floats around in the body as undigested proteins, and the immune system has to do something with this. So actually, undigested food can lead to immune problems, immune difficulties. Not only can it cause toxins in the body, and toxins will accumulate in the different tissues and in the organs, but also, if you have undigested proteins floating around in the bloodstream, the immune system recognizes those proteins as something that's not to be absorbed, and it creates an antibody to those proteins. So you begin to develop an immune response to certain foods that you haven't digested. So the next time you eat it, you may get a little bit of an allergic response to that food because the immune system now has a memory and it's watching for those proteins. So undigested proteins can be a source of immune difficulty and allergies, food allergies, and allergies in general. And you can get a subtle histamine response, which means that the histamine cells are releasing histamine, which creates mucus, runny nose, sometimes flush face, inflammation. Think of inflammation. So undigested food leads to inflammation and can lead to autoimmune problems. Rheumatoid arthritis, Hashimoto's, lupus. That's not the only cause of these, but it can be a big contributing factor. Undigested food. So we want to digest the food well. So it's important to chew it well, have it well prepared, and not eat till it's too full. So sometimes they will recommend 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. 1/3 food, 1/3 water, 1/3 empty. To not overeat. That's a guideline. I like to just listen to the body and see, okay, I'm almost full, but I'm not all the way full. And then the mind says, oh, but it was so good. One more plate. Or Swami Puratananda comes by at a retreat and pours more onto your plate. I say that with deepest love and respect. But if you've been to a retreat in Miami and Puratananda's there, you have to hide your plate. So loving, and he loves to serve, and he loves to pour more food onto your plate. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. So let's talk a little bit about this subtle digestion, because that's where the story gets really, really interesting. Have you heard of subtle digestion before? Did you know it takes 30 days to digest a meal? Some did, some didn't, yeah. So the food is changed into a liquid type of substance, very fine substance, and it passes through the intestines into the bloodstream. It enters into the bloodstream. And in Ayurvedic medicine, that would be called the rasa dhatu, which is the plasma. So they have separated out in the blood rasa and rakta. Rasa is the plasma and the white blood cells, and rakta is the red blood cells. So the plasma begins to absorb the subtle essence of the food, gross and subtle at this stage, and the sugar gets delivered to the muscles and the proteins, but it holds on to the more subtle essence of the food. And it digests it. So there's a fire, a digestive fire called Agni, that's very important to the digestive process. And it digests it, and it spends several days breaking it and refining it. And then the refined substance gets moved along to the next cell, the next tissue, which is the red blood cell. And the unrefined goes into other aspects of maintaining the physical body, such as the skin, the breast milk, is all nourished by this rasa dhatu, by this plasma and the subtle digestion. So that took several days. Now it's gone into the red blood cell, and the red blood cell spends 5 days digesting, refining, making it more refined. And the refined substance then is passed on to the next tissue, which is the muscle. And it spends 5 days. And then it gets passed on to the next tissue, which is the fat, and then the next tissue, which is the bone, and then the bone marrow, and the nerves. So at day 30, it's into the bone marrow and the nerves, nurturing the bone marrow, the nerves, and the mind. And then the most refined substance is the ojas, which is the immunoglobulins, the immune system. It's your essence, it's your glow, it's your health, it's your immune system. So now it's nurturing the cerebral spinal fluid, the immunoglobulins of the immune system. So what you ate 30 days ago is affecting your nerves today, is feeding your nerves. And it's telling your nerves what to do and how to behave and how to function. So let's say you ate some very nice healthy fats, such as ghee, 30 days ago. Now that refined substance, the essence of that food, the finest essence of that food, which is ether, air, fire, water, and earth, at their finest subtle levels, are now being expressed and exposed to the nerves. Now, if there's a lot of healthy fats and good foods and whole foods, the nerves say, oh, this is good. I like this. I can be calm. I can be relaxed. I'm receiving what I need. And I'm receiving the information from the prana how to respond to life. Now, what if you only ate potato chips? Okay, now you've got a bunch of dry, salty food arriving to the nerves. Inside in the nervous system, it doesn't know what's going on outside except for the information that the cells are receiving on the inside. They're receiving this information. It looks like a famine. So they think there's some kind of emergency on the outside. Because when would you eat dry rations? When there's a war, when there's a famine, when Healthy fatty foods aren't available. It's genetically encoded into it's built into our DNA. So this is epigenetics. You're telling your cells what to do and how to behave based on what you eat. So now all the cells think there's an emergency on the outside. There's a famine, or there's a war, or my crops, or I forgot to turn the compost, or I forgot to turn the water on. There's no food because they're feeding me all this dry, junky food. So the cells start to behave that way. One, they start to hold on to every calorie. Because if there's the perception that there's a famine, we better preserve all the calories. And two, they start to release special types of catecholamines, stress hormones, cortisol starts to get produced. All of these stress hormones get produced, they get produced in excess because the cells think there's an emergency on the outside, so I've got to prepare for this emergency. So I'm going to make all kinds of substances as if I'm getting ready to run, to starve, or to fight. That's the information that they're getting from all this dried, processed food. On the other hand, if they're getting nice khichdi and fresh ghee on the khichdi and well-prepared bitter melon, sound familiar? It's lunch today. Now, as that food comes into the cells, oh, there's fat, sneha. Well, always historically throughout mankind, if there's an abundance of fat in the diet, we're in good times. There's no famine. There's no war. There's abundance, peace, and harmony. If I'm making ghee, my cows are doing well. So the cells are now responding to what you're sending, the information that you're sending. So they're saying, oh, everything is good. I can relax. I can be at peace. I don't have to make cortisol. I don't have to make all of these stress hormones because I'm not under stress. And now the even more subtle essence of that food is going to the mind. And the mind can relax, the mind can be at peace. So you have a lot of control over your mind and your physiology through the food that you eat. But it takes 30 days to make the change. So any change that you make in your diet, you have to give it at least 30 days to see the effects, the full effects. You'll see some effects right away. Well, that's going to get into food combining, which is its own science. And we're not going to quite have time to get into that today. But it's an important topic of food combining because the way you combine your foods affects the digestion and your ability to digest and assimilate. And there's a whole science to it. There's pages and pages of it in the Ayurvedic literature. But some of the basic guidelines, did anybody know some of the basic guidelines? I'm sure people do. Yes?
Not mixing fruits with vegetables.
Thank you.
One at a time.
Yes. Fruit separate from other foods, especially bananas, because the body will digest the fruit first and the other food will stay behind and it will create a fermentation process. So fruit separate from others. People know any other suggestions? Melons especially. Melons a fruit, but especially melons. Melons separate from other foods. Dairy and beans are a hard combination to digest together.
Also no Mexican food?
Right. Right. Honey and ghee is a bad combination in equal proportion by weight. You can have a touch of honey with the ghee, but in equal proportion, it's a difficult combination to digest. Any others? No proteins and alkalines.
No raw and cooked food, Dr. Anand?
Which one?
No raw and cooked food.
Raw and cooked can be difficult. Yeah. And some say leftover and fresh can be difficult.
In fact, not even, the Ayurveda says don't even put it in the refrigerator.
Yeah. Typically, if you're going to do leftovers, 3 days. If it's more than 3 days, then it starts to become very tamasic. Mm-hmm. So 3 days is kind of the rule for leftovers. Fresh is ideal.
Even if it is frozen.
Well, that's going to be tamasic. Yeah. You can do it, but it will be more tamasic than a fresh meal. Mm-hmm.
Is frozen worse than refrigerated?
3 days refrigerated is better than 1 month frozen. The longer the food's been sitting, the less nutrient is available. But, in our modern times, there's frozen foods that are fine. It's just, you want to stay with fresh as much as possible. But a frozen meal or some frozen fruit thawed and eaten is better than potato chips. So it's all relative. It's all relative. It's all about a balance.
Is frozen veggies and fruit tamasic or?
It'll have some tamasic quality compared to fresh. Yes. But it... Yeah. What about the tastes of the food? Bless you.
How about milk and yogurt?
Milk and yogurt. I think that's a little hard to digest. Yeah. Yeah.
How about buttermilk, Dr. Anand?
Buttermilk's very good for the digestive system.
No matter what dosha you are.
It can be a little bit on the warming side. Buttermilk. Buttermilk.
I have heard about goat milk kefir. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't have any.
Okay. And someone has been recommending that. They said for allergies it has really helped them drinking goat milk kefir.
So some people digest goat milk easier than cow's milk. If people are having trouble with cow's milk, I will usually suggest to try the A2 cow's milk first. And if they can handle that, and if not, then to try the goat's milk. Yeah. I'm a big fan of A2 cow's milk. I like the A2. Is everyone familiar with the A2, A1? There's 2 milk proteins that cows produce. Actually, there's 4, I think. So there's a A1 and an A2 protein in the milk, and it's only the Brahman cow will make the A2 protein. The Jersey cows and other cows make an A1 protein, and the A2 protein is easier for most humans to digest and absorb than the A1. So some people with milk sensitivity or milk allergy can handle an A2 protein. And it's getting very popular now. You can find it in the stores. It used to be a little harder to find, but I'm seeing it more and more in the stores. It'll say A2 right on the container. Grass-fed A2.
How about the other type of milks like oatmeal, almond milk, and other type of milks? Any thoughts there, Dr. Owen?
The other types of milks?
Yes, like oat
Mhm.
oatmeal milk, oat milk,
Mhm.
almond milk, and others.
Do you like it?
Well, a substitute for milk, that is why.
You're looking for a substitute for milk. Hmm. You know, almond milk is very nice, but it's even better if you make it yourself. Because in the store-bought almond milk, they're using about 2 almonds for that whole container. If you make it yourself, you can soak a whole cup of almonds to about 6 cups of water and soak it overnight. And then put it into the Vitamix. And if you need a little sweetener, you can add some agave or a touch of sugar and blend it really well and then strain it. And the almond milk will build the ojas nicely. Yeah. The more you process a food, the more it's difficult to digest, and the less the body knows what to do with it. So here's the thing. You can find 1,000 rules for diet, and it'll drive you crazy. So what I recommend is to go off the taste. And what I mean by that is the taste of the food will tell the effect. Right? So we have the sweet taste, the sour taste, the salty taste, bitter, astringent, and pungent. And we need all of these tastes. We need them all. So we said, for example, yesterday, if you take Triphala, whatever taste you get is the taste you're most missing. Okay? And the tongue, each part of the tongue has a sensory for that particular taste, and it's related to that particular organ. So the tip of the tongue tastes the sweet taste. And it's also related to the thyroid, the tip of the tongue. So you can tell a person's thyroid condition by looking at the tip of the tongue. And when you taste sweet, the nerves from the tip of the tongue start to activate the pancreas as soon as you taste sweet. And the salivary glands will start to produce saliva as soon as you taste sweet. Now, if you have no sweet in your diet, it's a problem. But you only need a little bit of sweet. Sweet taste, it brings love and joy to all the tissues, and it nurtures all the tissues. And it enhances the ojas. So sweet taste is important, but not so much. If you take too much sweet, you're going to have a damp, cold condition. It's going to make you heavy and sluggish. It'll increase the need for sleep, and it'll start to make a propensity towards diabetes. And it'll make the thyroid slow and sluggish. So it's not that you want to eliminate all of the sweet taste, but you want to minimize just a little sweet. And that's sensed on the tip of the tongue. The bitter taste, the sensory is more towards the middle of the tongue. That's where the taste buds are for bitter. And it also on the tongue reflects where the small intestine and the liver is. So you can tell the condition of a person's small intestines, liver, by looking at the middle of the tongue. And the bitter taste is very, very important. We had a lot of bitter taste today, right? The bitter melon. So examples of bitter would be turmeric, aloe, fenugreek, bitter melon. And bitter is very good for reducing the pitta. It's very good for the liver.
In what form can we take sweet? You mentioned sweet taste is important.
Shatavari,
Okay.
milk, ghee, all have sweet taste. Yeah.
No sugar, right?
Well, you don't need to get it from sugar. Sugar is sweet, but there's other things that are sweet taste that aren't sugar. Fruit. Most fruit has some degree of sweet taste. Honey. So what it is, the taste is telling us the essence that's behind the substance. Right? So it's the essence of the food that we're interested in, not the appearance. The appearance is important. The food should be nicely prepared and appear nice and come, on a nice plate. That's important because it's eating and nutrition and food is all the senses. It's a sensory experience. Have you ever listened to your food?
The numbers.
Yeah. Yeah, you listen to your food. You'll learn a lot about the food. If you want to know about anything, listen. And there's a reason for that. Because every sense is connected to one of the elements. We all are created from the 5 elements. Everything in creation is from the 5 elements, right? It started with one substance, one thought, and then entered into 5 elements. It actually started with 5 electrical currents. It actually started with 1 electrical current that became 2, that became 5. So there was a polarization that happened as soon as there's an idea of a thought. Now there's the creator and the idea of what's being created. Now you have 2, you have a polarization. So you have now a positive and a negative pole, an expulsion and an attraction. And then you have a neutralizing factor that's right in between the 2. So you have Rajas, Tamas, and Sattva, expressing as 3 electrical potencies. And then out of those 3, you have 1 more between each of the positive and negative poles, so you end up with 5 electrical frequencies that become the 5 elements. And that's true for anything in creation. The human body, the food, the earth, the trees, the plants, all have some combination of the 5 elements. And that's where the taste is so important, because the taste tells us what elements they're including. And the taste tells us which doshas they're going to affect. So the food is all made up of these 5 elements. Sweet taste affects the thyroid and the upper lungs. Okay? So if you get too much sweet taste, you can get a slow thyroid. And the sour taste affects the lungs. So a little bit of sour supports the lungs. Too much sour, you end up with phlegm and congestion in the lungs. The salty taste affects the kidneys. The bitter taste affects the pancreas and the spleen and the liver. And the astringent taste affects the large intestine. So there's healthy craving and unhealthy craving. So when we're in balance, the craving is healthy. When we're out of balance, we're often craving the dosha that's out of balance. Because the dosha takes on an energetic form in the body that wants to sustain itself, because every form has ahamkara. Every form has ego or identity of an I separate from the whole. So even an out of balance dosha has an identity that's trying to stay as it is. So when you, oftentimes you'll see people that are very pitta are craving spicy foods because they're out of balance, because the dosha is driving that. But once they're put into balance and the dosha has been pacified and they're in balance, they're going to not crave. And if they start to get a little out of balance, they'll crave the bitter to bring it back down, or the sweet taste to bring it back down. So we have to be careful with cravings. Is it a balanced craving, or is it not balanced? Every food has all the 5 elements in it, so you could get almost any taste out of every food, but it's the predominant. Okay, so bitter melon, the predominant taste is bitter, but it's gonna, if you are really in balance, you can taste a little sweet in bitter melon, because every taste is in there, but its predominant is bitter. When you're out of balance, it's going to taste very bitter. Some people, when they first eat bitter melon, they can hardly even, and then as they get healthier, they start to actually like it. But you're getting sour taste in triphala, sour taste in bitter melon. Squeeze some lemon in your water.
I usually do that every day.
Oh, good. You haven't had it here, so your body's missing something that it's used to getting. The sour taste stimulates the metabolism to be more active, and it makes you more sensitive. If you notice, when you take a sour taste, when you first taste the sour, yeah, because all the senses are activated and awakened and alert. So the sour taste makes you more sensitive to the environment. So if you're oversensitive, you might be getting too much sour. Too much sour can increase the acidity in the system. A little bit of sour will reduce the phlegm, but too much sour will increase the phlegm. So you'll start to get congestion in the lungs, phlegmy lung from too much sour, but you probably don't have that problem. Yeah. Too much sour will make the mind agitated, critical, and it increases jealousy. Yeah. Too much salty taste will create more addiction in the mind. If you take too much salt, if you're having some addiction to anything or obsession of anything, reduce the salt. On the other hand, if you completely eliminated salt, completely had no salty taste, which is almost impossible in the West, you could lose courage. Salt brings a little courage. The salty taste brings courage. In the West, you'd almost have to live in a cave and not put any salt in anything to completely eliminate the salty taste. But the salty taste is gives rise to part of the creative energy and the creativity and the courage. So lack of salt, no courage. Too much salt, addiction. Mm-hmm. Every taste has an effect on the mind. Too much of any taste is not good. The taste to most be cautious of in the West is the salty and the sweet, because there's excess of that. So each of the senses is connected to one of the elements. And so if we get depletion of that element in the taste, that sense will be affected. So the hearing is connected to the ether element. And the touch is connected to the air element. And the sight is connected to the fire element. And the taste is connected to the water element. And the smell is connected to the earth element. So what's the first sense that's activated when you walk into a room? The smell, the heaviest of the elements. The first thing you notice is the smell. And then what's the most subtle of the elements? What's the most subtle? Ether. Ether element. And so what's the most subtle and sensitive sense of the 5 external senses? Touch is air. Hearing, listening. So if you listen deeply to anything, you're actually engaging all 5 senses, because as the prana brings the external world to the internal observer, it's bringing the earth, the water, the fire, the air, and the ether. But if we're using our eyes, we're missing that last one, right? So the eyes are sensitive, they can see a lot. But if you're listening, you're getting all of the information, because it's bringing all of the elements to the observer. So listen to your food. Listen to anything you want to understand, anything you want to know better. Listen. It's the least aggressive of the senses. The other senses can be a little aggressive. You know, the sight can be aggressive, the touch can be aggressive, the tongue can be aggressive, but not the listening. I've never had anybody's feelings hurt when we were listening to them. I've never hurt somebody's feelings listening, right? But what's more fascinating is what happens to your sensory experience when you listen to something. Because you wouldn't think to listen to your oatmeal this morning. But it'll tell you a story. You'll get a whole story about the oatmeal and how it was grown and the sun that it received and how much love went into it when it was being prepared, and what it's going to do when it gets inside. You'll get so much, all the wisdom and knowledge of any substance, of anything, comes from listening. And you're listening with all the senses. And it's putting you in touch with the prana and the essence of that substance, that aspect of life, at a deeper level. And then the mind will get still, because you're moving closer to the essence of that substance. And the mind will get still and quiet. And the prana will start to carry you closer to the source of all knowledge. And you'll come to an understanding that you couldn't have come to by reading a book. And you'll know that that food is good for you or not good for you. You won't have to worry about the rules, which are helpful in the beginning. But your own inner wisdom, your own knowledge, your own inner physician will tell you, just by listening, no, not the right food for me today or this morning. And if you want to know about the plants out in nature, you listen to them, they'll tell you. They'll tell you their story. You go into the garden and look at those beautiful ashwagandha plants and listen to them. And you see these big roots that go down deep into the earth and how they can sustain all types of weather changes. And you'll start to get a sense, oh, this is a very hardy plant, and it's going to bring that robust energy, that robust prana is going to assimilate into this form. And its adaptability to all the weather. Oh yes, ashwagandha improves your adaptability. It improves your nervous system's capacity to be more adaptable. It improves your immune system's capacity to adapt to change. And that starts to come from listening. So we listen to each other. Listen to the silence between the words. That's where the communication is. When somebody's talking to us, listen to the silence and the pauses between the words. Then we'll understand each other. And we'll know even if we're saying two different things, we still love each other. Because it'll come out in that silence and that pause between the words.